10 takeaways. What a week. What a fun week. This was a big week. Big week. A lot happened. And we have to start with Anthony Richardson. This is huge. Absolutely huge for Anthony Richardson. Now, the historic winds are still blowing in his face, right? We still have a headwind here in Dynasty for Anthony Richardson. It's a rare case that a quarterback could get benched this early in his career and then come back and be a franchise-level quarterback, getting $300 million, being a top 10 Dynasty asset. But it's just not that hard, given his skill set, his incredible deep ball, his incredible mobility, for an Anthony Richardson to be a top 10 Dynasty quarterback. And now he's right back in the conversation. He is right back in the conversation, and I'm so happy for him. I'm so happy for everyone that traded for him, that decided, you know what? I've heard the pros and the cons, but the upside here, especially in single quarterback leagues and single quarterback Dynasty leagues, the upside is so great. And yes, it's still true that a player like a Brock Purdy is better in superflex. Oh, yes. Oh, no doubt. Look what Brock Purdy did again. All Brock Purdy does is score fantasy points. And Brock Purdy is also very young. Brock Purdy is going to be a guy you can set it and forget it in superflex for 10 years. So, of course, you'd rather have a Brock Purdy than Anthony Richardson, who is still risky. But, wow, they set him up to fail. They absolutely set this man up to fail, and he delivered. He delivered against this Jets defense. He delivered against Sauce Gardner. You have to just, bravo. He carried the Colts. 2 rushing touchdowns, 67% completion percentage, 9 yards per attempt. And Josh Downs got there. I mean, just the 5 targets, this was the worry, right? This was the problem. Josh Downs, 5 targets, but he turned those 5 targets into 5 catches because he's Josh Downs, and a touchdown. So Josh Downs was able to get there in spite of Anthony Richardson. This is incredible news for Josh Downs. Josh Downs once again establishes himself as the alpha in this passing game. If you started someone else, if you started Jauan Jennings, there was a bunch of debates in this zone of receiver on the weekly projections. We talked about it on the Starter Stream show. Understandable. If you didn't want to start Josh Downs this week, see what happens. It's not like he totally melted faces or anything, right? I mean, 19 fantasy points, something like that. So you got to see it, and now you're like, okay, now every other matchup is going to be easier. Instead of going to MetLife, now he gets a home game with lots of garbage time against Detroit. Now, I know Detroit's looking so good, but okay, they completely blanked Mac Jones. That's not indicative of anything. Right? It's still very possible in Lucas Oil Stadium, especially for Anthony Richardson to put up numbers. And whoever benched him, however that came to be, it should be ashamed of themselves. Now, it could have been very much, equity holder driven. And so that's why the coach just doing the bidding of his master, and that's what happened. And if that's the case, then there's not going to be any ramifications. There's going to be no consequences for starting an inferior quarterback in Joe Flacco in favor of an Anthony Richardson. I mean, this was the way to go all along. That he was ever benched is a farce. And yes, there's a historic headwind. It's rare that a quarterback ever ascends fully after being benched at this point in his career, but anything's possible in the NFL. There's all kinds of suboptimal decisions that get made, and this could just be the outlier, the exception that proves the rule, that this is the one exception. Hey, we could be looking back and like, hey, Anthony Richardson's been the only guy to get benched at this point in his career, and it was because there was all of this internal angst, and the owner is in bad health, or whatever it is, and that's the reason why. So Evan Ringler, our head of analytics, constantly coming on and pointing out the fact that there's no quarterback in the league really right now with a better deep ball than Anthony Richardson. I want to see what this guy can do. I'm excited for him. I'm excited to play him. It's not great for Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he's so big, right? So it turns out that all the fears that we had about Saquon Barkley being tethered to Jalen Hurts, on a week-to-week basis, certainly there's going to be some weeks where Hurts takes those touchdowns away from Barkley, but in the aggregate, Barkley was a great draft pick. Barkley's a great play every week based on his upside. Could be that Jonathan Taylor really was the one that needed to be faded based on being tethered to a mobile quarterback, not Saquon Barkley. So that's we had to start there, right? We had to start with Anthony Richardson, and that he's a start moving forward. I mean, he's a must start, right? Again, it's one of those things where, okay, you didn't start him this week, okay, right? You wanted to see what happens, and you had him on your bench. You started a guy like Brock Purdy instead, and there's no harm in that. There's no harm in that. The one harm would have been, and again, we talked about this in the Starter Stream show, the one harm would have been starting Patrick Mahomes. That was the easiest fade to see coming ever, right? Fading Mahomes, fading Kelsey, fading all of these Chiefs. And in the game where everyone was fading Chiefs who knew anything, that we had Xavier Worthy finally raise his hand and say, I'm here to be counted. I'm here to produce some fantasy points. I'm a wide receiver in the NFL and I can do things. This was great news. DeAndre Hopkins, right? Woof. Just a woof fest for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know what happened to him. I mean, I think he got Patrick Surtain. That's probably what happened. So, I mean, let's pull this game up right now. I got to pull this game up because I want to look deeply at this game. He didn't get Patrick Surtain. That was a different game. Mahomes had 3 touchdowns, 21 fantasy points. We had him projected as the QB 16-ish. DeAndre Hopkins, 5 fantasy points, 4 targets. He was crushed by Noah Gray, and Travis Kelce only had 2 fantasy points. I worry about Travis Kelce in that at this age, you don't know what you're getting when you wake up in the morning at that age, right? This is very much a Ben Roethlisberger corollary. He is the equivalent age of Ben Roethlisberger at the end, right? Given the age curve of tight ends versus the age curve of quarterbacks, he's about that age, okay? So this is the worry with Travis Kelce and also DeAndre Hopkins. I still like DeAndre Hopkins. This was just not the week to play these guys. This wasn't the week to play Kareem Hunt. This wasn't the week to play any of these guys. And so if you benched Patrick Mahomes for Anthony Richardson, congratulations. That was a good move, and that was a recommended move. It was just funny. It was funny to see all the quarterbacks we had projected ahead of Patrick Mahomes, and yet still, he got there, 21 fantasy points on 196 yards. So it's always fun to look back on Monday at who got there because of touchdowns and who luck boxed their way into it, and that was Mahomes. That was not a great process play, and Mahomes does not have the weapons to be a guy that you want to start week in, week out with confidence. Oh, man. I can't believe. So Kansas City takes their first loss on the road at Buffalo. This was the predictable loss on the calendar. The Bills were 2.5-point favorites. If you pounded the over on that, then you won. If you took the Bills against the spread, you won. And another guy that we had projected very high, I'm pretty sure we had him projected higher than anyone else in the industry, was Khalil Shakir. I know that created a little bit of debate on the Starter Stream show, really, you guys are this high on Khalil Shakir, and Khalil Shakir, he barely got there, but he did, right? He got his projection, 15 fantasy points. But that game, he had 12 targets. That's the bare minimum, right? Based on the target share, he should have had 20-plus fantasy points. That was a great process play. I happen to start Curtis Samuel just based on the law of the conservation of targets that we had no Keon Coleman and no Dalton Kincaid, right? So you had two guys out, two starters out. You have a guy coming back in Curtis Samuel. Seemed like a potential start, and I can actually pull up my team here. We should be looking at my team where I did this. This is an expert league. Now, with some of these expert leagues, your opponent doesn't always start anybody. Sometimes certain people do these just because it's on SiriusXM and they don't take it that seriously. Okay, but there's plenty of people that are taking it seriously. So if we take a look at this. This is the team. It was the Jaden Daniels team. This was a 0 RB roster. This team is 6-4, about to be 7-4. And so I just want to show it is possible to win this year with 0 RB, but you had to get some receivers right. And I have T. Higgins, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They carried the day with Curtis Samuel. And then we had Malik Neighbors on the bench because of the bye week, and Dalton Kincaid on the bench, and I started Hunter Henry at tight end. That worked out. 12 fantasy points from your tight end is just fine. And even in a game where Jaden Daniels didn't necessarily get there, it's okay. It worked out. Jalen Waddle is interesting. You can see the 5.7 points from Jalen Waddle. That's not great. I continue to believe in Jalen Waddle and going right back to Jalen Waddle. Just like we continued to recommend on Patreon, patreon.com/Podfather, streaming Jonnu Smith, always a top option. Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, top options for streaming, as well as, of course, Taysom Hill. And they all got there. Two of them smashed this week. Keep going back to Jonnu Smith. He is the third option on a team that is now, a well-oiled offensive machine. Anytime you have a tight end with explosive athleticism, who is the clear and distinct third option on that team, you just got to keep going back to it. Don't worry about last week's results. Oh, he only had 8 fantasy points. Oh, he only had 7 fantasy points. Process-wise, continuing to start and stream Jonnu Smith as needed is the right process, and then all of a sudden he comes up, and what does he have, 28 fantasy points, something like that? Absolutely incredible week for him. You'll love to see him dominating Travis Kelce. Again, so Travis Kelce, this is what we're going to get. You're going to have some games where he's feeling good, he's feeling limber, he's waking up in the morning on Sunday, and everything's feeling good, and then you have some weeks where he's not going to have it based on his age. That is the volatility that you're going to be walking into and just embracing if you have Travis Kelce. Jonnu Smith, on 8 targets, he had 6 catches, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, 28 fantasy points. We don't want to shortchange Jonnu Smith. 28 fantasy points. This is what a guy like Jonnu Smith is always capable of. I would much rather stream a guy like this as opposed to streaming a guy that has base athleticism, but he happens to be like the second option on his team, or maybe even potentially the first option. Okay, fine. But I want the spike week potential of a guy like Jonnu Smith. That's why I like the athleticism. And who had athleticism also? Taysom Hill, right? 40 fantasy points. The big question I have is, I went back and I looked at this. So if this was there with Taysom Hill, why weren't you doing this with Spencer Rattler? Why giving Spencer Rattler all this rope to go out and hang himself out to dry? Why not help Spencer Rattler by rotating in Taysom Hill more often? Because weeks go by. week after week after week goes by and we don't get this outcome we know is out there. We know this kind of upside play is out there with 3 touchdown games are out there for Taysom Hill. We've seen them before. We know they're possible. This seems like the perfect opportunity when you have Spencer Rattler under center or Jake Haener under center to go and see how far we can push this Taysom Hill thing. But no, I think really what it comes down to is when Spencer Rattler is in the game, they're just not in the red zone very often. So there's very few opportunities to break out this Taysom Hill because like Taysom Hill is a red zone guy, right? But with Derek Carr under center, sometimes you have the right matchup at home where it's like, okay, we're finding ourselves in the red zone quite a bit here. And, you know, part of that's because there's Jameis Winston on the other end. Now, Jameis Winston approached 400 yards. So that was great. Jameis Winston helped Elijah Moore get there. He helped Jerry Jeudy get there. We had all these guys clustered. Right? I was disappointed. It's one of those things where emotionally, I really wanted to see Cedric Tillman projected higher on Sunday morning. We're going to do the starter stream show. I'm like, God, on upside, I'm going to go Tillman if you need him for upside. But based on our projections, I can't recommend starting Tillman in all these situations where people have, you know, better options according to our projections. And I'm like, man, is it really that close between Tillman and Moore and Jeudy? Because my emotions tell me it's all about Cedric Tillman. The problem is the data says, no, actually, one guy's getting 12 targets one week, another guy's getting 11 another week, and it could be any of these 3 guys going off. Probably multiple. When you have Jameis Winston going to New Orleans, it's probably going to be 2 of these guys going off. We just don't know who they're going to be. So that's why Tillman more of an upside play than a guy you're just locking in, especially if you're a favorite. There's no need to start a guy like Cedric Tillman if it's a shallower league and you're like, I have some quality options here. It was like, I remember, you're actually starting Khalil Shakir. I'm like, really? Cool. That seems, I don't know. Is that right? Sure. Yeah. One team has lost a couple key targets in the offense. One team hasn't. One team is going into an environment where they're going to have to throw to be competitive. Sure enough, Khalil Shakir was a better option than Tillman this week. Neither one of them really smashed, but Khalil Shakir also the process play, the right process play. And, you know, shout out to my my father-in-law, found out this weekend this is his favorite show. So Mark Miller, I salute you, sir. I appreciate your support of the show and this program. Turns out Podfather at rotounderworld.com, a lot of you like this show. It's not that easy to do a solo show and to have all this information readily available and ready to share. I produce it on my own, do it all on my own. I really enjoy it. It's a little easier when I get dosed with caffeine from my wife, but this is still half calf, so this is the normal speed. The Wilson Pickens stack. All right, so speaking of stacks that didn't get there, we talked about this was the week to stack, and not all these stacks really delivered. The Jameis Winston Tillman stack, that big upside stack, didn't deliver. Turns out it was the Winston Jeudy stack that hit randomly. And then next week it's going to be Tillman again. And the week after that it's going to be Elijah Moore again. But the thing I want to focus on is Elijah Moore. I mean, Elijah Moore, it turns out he is who we thought he was. He is a good player. Every time I look up, what is Elijah Moore doing? Elijah Moore is commanding 10 plus targets. What did he do this week? 8 targets, right? 66 and 6. So he had 666. Crazy, right? 18 fantasy points. He's a good receiver. We know this. David Njoku. Why do we love David Njoku? Why are we starting a David Njoku over a Cade Otton, for example? Because David Njoku has big playability. David Njoku, 9 for 9. Anytime you go 9 for 9 with Jameis Winston under center, you're feeling good about that. I mean, Jameis Winston had a super efficient day. We talk about playing Jameis Winston this week. He was a must start. And, he had 3 great stacking partners, just not Cedric Tillman. If I told you, right, that 3 guys hit 18 fantasy points tethered to Jameis Winston, you would be sure one of them was Tillman. And it turns out Tillman had just as many targets as Elijah Moore. It's just those were the targets that didn't connect. These are not the plays that you need to worry about. These are not the plays you need to be chastising yourself about. This was a great process, right? He had 8 targets. The other guys all got 18 plus fantasy points. It just didn't work out. If you started Tillman over Josh Downs, one guy got 8 targets, one guy got 5 targets. One guy had huge unknowns. Like, what is Anthony Richardson going to be, especially against a difficult defense on the road? Oh, right. If you went and you lost your matchup, let's say, because you started Tillman over Downs, I'm telling you, the last thing you should be doing is regretting any decision you made. You made the right call. One guy almost doubled the other guy's targets. And the other guy had 46 pass attempts up for grabs, and 3 of his teammates had 18 plus fantasy points. The other guy just maxed out every single one of his targets because he's that good, but had a huge cloud of uncertainty around him. So it was close. I mean, this was that cluster of receivers in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 zone of the projections this week. And wide receiver is a volatile position, and this can happen. It's absolutely the right process. Shakir and Tillman this week were the right process. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. There was a question about, do I start Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Is this point chasing? The answer was no. Who else do they have? I'm looking at all of the targets. It was Taysom Hill. It was Foster Moreau. It was Jawan Johnson. It was Alvin Kamara. He's what they have at wide receiver. Of course, you're starting Marquez Valdez-Scantling in one of these fringe, I don't know who to start. The team I just shared with you, it's a 14-teamer. It's difficult to find wide receivers. I would have started Marquez Valdez-Scantling over Curtis Samuel. I preferred it. He just wasn't available. It's a deep league. Curtis Samuel was all that was there. And, just like with Nick Westbrook-Akine, it worked out. And now I could have started Nick Westbrook-Akine. How was I supposed to know he was going to catch a 98-yard touchdown? I'll tell you what. R.C. Fisher was a big advocate of Anthony Richardson, big advocate for Will Levis. I could hear him smiling from North Carolina, R.C. Fisher. No, okay, Will Levis had a good game, close to 300 yards. Let's look at Will Levis. Will Levis, only 1 interception. Okay. 7 rushing attempts. Good, right? By the way, this was the week to bench Tony Pollard, even though he had an injury to Tajay Spears, which helped to knock him out of the game, and more opportunities funneled to Tony Pollard. This was not the week to start Tony Pollard. The Minnesota defense is absolutely super stout, and for Will Levis to put up close to 300 yards, I mean, wow, and Calvin Ridley. The reason why that wasn't great process was the Minnesota defense, though there was a bit of bad luck with Calvin Ridley, right? So if we look at Calvin Ridley, he had a 51-yard touchdown catch called back. He would have had 7 targets, right? That's still lower than Khalil Shakir, lower than Cedric Tillman. As I know, there's difficult choices when you have Shakir and Tillman and a Calvin Ridley. Like I said, this was a difficult week for starting and sitting wide receivers in this area. And I think going based on the matchup and potentially stacking a Winston with a Tillman and that helping you make your decision, that was the way to go. You weren't stacking Will Levis with Calvin Ridley. That would have been absolutely suicidal. And they put up a combined 25 fantasy points. So that would not have worked out. This wasn't the week to start Pollard. This was the week to bench everybody. Like absolutely everybody on the Titans. This was the week to bench them. I was expecting more from Justin Jefferson, from Aaron Jones. Just didn't work out. It's one of those games where the Vikings get out to a big lead. It was 16-3 at the half, and they just decided this is a road game. We're going to sit on it, and the game flow works that way. Minnesota's defense is becoming a real problem. This was a takeaway last week. It's a takeaway again this week. It's hurting Justin Jefferson. It's hurting Aaron Jones. These are key players. I have a lot of Jefferson, as you know. I have a lot of the guys I was drafting in the middle of the first round on a loop, Jefferson and St. Brown. Jefferson, St. Brown, St. Brown, Jefferson. I was drafting St. Brown as early as the 103. And these Jefferson teams, how is this possible? You're like, oh, Darnold, he has 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Darnold is exceeding everyone's wildest dreams for a career renaissance. And yet, Darnold to Jefferson is not as fruitful as we would like. It's just not. I'm here to admit it. Hey, the defense is a problem, Minnesota. It really is. And this was the case for Cooper Kupp. This was always the case for Puka Nacua. Was the defense in Los Angeles we knew was hollowed out with free agency and a lack of draft picks. And as it turns out, there they go. Matthew Stafford, ageless, 70% completion percentage, right? You have 300 yards and 4 touchdowns on cue. Oh, the beauty is I want to go to this game because I want to see this. I got to see this with my own eyes. I'm looking at my notes and I'm seeing it, but I have to pull up the box score. I have to see this. Kyren Williams did not luck box a touchdown. Kyren Williams was actually efficient. What an ironic game. This is the most ironic running back performance of the year. Kyren Williams is actually efficient for once and doesn't luck box the touchdown. They all go to the players they should go to, and then also Cody Parkinson. Puka Nacua, 25 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp, 28 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp, the real number one. He had one more target. Than Puka Nacua. And this may have been, this was the thing. This carried the day on Fast Draft. So we need to talk about Fast Draft. The Flex 6 Frenzy went off for the first time. This was a very big deal. I'm just super proud of what happened. We rolled out for the first time. We rolled out a DFS game. Let's get this. Okay. So, as you can see, first place goes to Brian Carrion. So this is what we're going to do. Every week, we are going to celebrate the winner of the Fast Draft DFS game, the Flex 6 Frenzy. Brian Carrion wins $300. Congratulations. How'd he get there? Well, he started with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but look what he did. You can look what he did. He then drafted Kenneth Walker, and then he drafted Cooper Kupp. But what's clever about what he did is you can see here the 3 diamonds on top of Cooper Kupp's head. He set Cooper Kupp as his second captain, which gives him 1.75x, and Walker 1.5x. That was the difference. Had he had Walker as the second captain and Coop as the third captain, he would have finished in second place. So he barely won, and it was because of the way he configured those captain's chairs. And then, of course, Brock Bowers in the fourth captain chair. He drafted Tillman, which was a great process play. I'll say it again, and it didn't matter. He won in spite of drafting Tillman, and he also had a really bad draft pick. I'm going to say this, Brian, for the future. Just because I streamed Hunter Henry in a very deep expert league does not mean you draft Hunter Henry in the Flex 6 contest. There's a lot of great options in round 6. Jameson Williams typically was a great option. This was the big thing. The big thing we talked about on the Starter Stream show was playing Jameson Williams, that this was the week. If there was ever a week to play Jameson Williams, it was a soft matchup against the Jaguars. The implied points were 30. Like, was it 30 implied points for the Lions? I mean, it was incredible. It was exactly 30 implied points for the Detroit Lions. How do you think they're going to get those points? Where do you think those points are going to come from? They're going to come from big plays early in the game, and one of those big plays is probably going to be a long touchdown to Jameson Williams. That was like the easiest thing to see ahead of time. And so if you're drafting on Fast Draft in the 6th round, that final pick, you got to go upside there. And the anti-upside was Hunter Henry. Now you got super clever with your captain chair, and you put Coop in there, and then that was it. Great job. However, you won in spite of the Hunter Henry. That's just a bad pick. That was a bad process pick. As good as the Tillman process pick was that dudded out, Henry was a better pick with fantasy points, much worse process. But anyway, Brian Carrion, winner of the inaugural Fast Draft DFS contest. This is, I'm tingling. This is a big deal. And shout out to our whole engineering team. Shout out to Billy. Shout out to Evan. Shout out to everybody out there that has had, has helped us in any way, promoting the app, building the app, whatever it is. It was a big test to see if we could get DFS live by the end of the year, and we did it. And it almost filled. Like that tournament was like one draft away from filling. I saw on Saturday, boom, all these drafts started going off, bang, 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 and then Sunday morning they were going off even faster. And the cool thing is you can just submit your rankings, and you can order 5 teams. You could just say, hey, I don't have time to draft live. I can just do turbo, and I can just submit 5 teams, and I'm done. And if you use promo code Podfather, I'll hook you up with a free draft. You deposit with promo code Podfather, I'll send you a free draft on me. And with Brian Carrion, I'm sending him a T-shirt. I'm sending him a Fast Draft T-shirt. So if you win, you get a free Fast Draft T-shirt, and only select members of the Fast Draft staff and some key members of Player Profiler have Fast Draft T-shirts. So you're going to be, you're that truly exclusive gear. I actually have a T-shirt maker in town that makes these, and we ship them by hand. So that, again, more incentive to try to win this thing. And it's such a cool place to be, where we're analyzing fantasy football, and we're talking about stats, and we're publishing stats, and we're publishing rankings, and we have all these podcasts at Player Profiler. And now, for the first time, week in, week out, we can talk about a platform that we were responsible for creating. That's never been done. It's never been done. The media companies, the fantasy analysts had always shepherded users off to other platforms to actually play fantasy football. So this is a watershed moment in the industry that we're able to do this. And everyone, like I said, everyone behind the scenes that made it possible, I am deeply grateful to, because of, we're talking about getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure that the payouts go out on time. We're talking about, working all day on Sunday as the scores are coming in, and the API is down, and it's just we need to refresh the user experience. Someone has to be there. This stuff does not happen by itself. There's not robots you can hire or buy to just make the app and make it go. It's all a lot of human beings behind the scenes. And so anyone that goes to fastdraft.app, uses it, you're supporting all of us here. And we took a big business risk to make this happen. Very big business risk. It's going to be years until this pays off, if it ever pays off. So anything that any teams you can create, any entries, not only is it fun, not only can you make money, but you're also supporting an enterprise that took a big business risk. And I think based on the feedback, based on the positive feedback, based on the reviews, I think we're onto something. We'll see what happens. But that's the update from Fast Draft World. And so that's happening. Drake May got there. Drake May went over 20 fantasy points in that same game. That was great. Demario Douglas, again, this was the desperation streamer we talked about. MVS, Demario Douglas, Curtis Samuel. Samuel MVS got there. Demario Douglas, some 10 fantasy points, didn't quite get there. But I think still good process. He's a better player than Kendrick Bourne. He's going to have weeks. Things are getting easier for him. We talk about the guys that were drafted after Amon-Ra St. Brown and how you could have done differently and how you could have had Jameson Williams. But we just need to take a moment, right? Take a moment and acknowledge Amon-Ra St. Brown. He steps up when it's a difficult matchup, and he also comes and delivers big fantasy points in the easy matchups as well. Absolutely dominating. Amon-Ra, 2 touchdowns. This is the thing, though. When most wide receivers score 2 touchdowns, it's a surprise. It's like, oh my God, we lucked out. Thank God. When Amon-Ra scores 2 touchdowns, that's another day at the office. Same with David Montgomery. David Montgomery scoring 2 touchdowns, that's a day at the office of David Montgomery. I mean, that was the 0 RB running back was David Montgomery. It wasn't Aaron Jones. We said it was Aaron Jones earlier this year. Turns out the Minnesota defense is making it hard. The great thing is the Lions defense is also super smothering, and it doesn't matter. They're happy to blow teams out by, 46 points. 46 points. And congratulations to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is back. He took a step forward. No Shane Waldron. The witch is dead. This put the Bears in position to win. I predicted the Bears would win. Part of the bold prediction show that we did. And there was a blocked field goal. That's always great, right? You have the one big bold prediction you think is going to come through. I was looking at the scores. I'm like, oh my God, Bears got this. They're driving. This is happening. And then the blocked field goal. It's like, that's perfect, right? That's just so. When your predictions don't work out with the NFL, it's always a blocked field goal. It's always it's just the Murphy's Law of the NFL. It really is. 10 targets. 10 targets for Rome Odunze. 10 targets. And we closed out the Starter Stream show. We had someone ask, more or more? Should I start more or more this week? And I answered, spoiler alert, more. You should definitely start more. More or more, start more. And then DJ Moore got there just with pure efficiency. Great. No touchdowns, though, but barely got there. Usable week. And then we had the touchdown for Elijah Moore. So it was a great week for the Moores. Great week for DeAndre Swift. He's making himself undeniable. They're not able to play Roschon Johnson because DeAndre Swift, week in, week out, again, super efficient. 71 yards on 14 carries. You love to see it. You love to see Bo Nix carving up the Falcons secondary. We didn't get the Kirk Cousins injury. That was a joke, right? That was the bold prediction joke, was that Kirk Cousins would get injured. That didn't happen. We didn't want him injured. Don't want him injured at all. I thought maybe he might break a finger just because this defense is so ferocious. Not the week to start Bijan. It's Denver. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's Bijan. You're not starting these guys. I predicted a 0 for Drake London. He did get the 3 catches. So congrats to him for the 3 catches. But duds all around for the Falcons. And this could usher in. I mean, I think that Kirk Cousins has done more to deserve a benching in favor of Michael Penix than Anthony Richardson did to deserve a benching in favor of Joe Flacco. Right? And these are the two, we talked about this. These are the two decrepit owners. You have Arthur Blank, who's a much more reasonable top equity holder, and then you have Jim Irsay, who is, right? He's an interesting character. He's an interesting, unstable character who can be, not the best. Not the best guy to be at the helm of your franchise, exerting pressure on the front office and the coaching staff. He should be ashamed of himself after what happened with Anthony Richardson this week. So I'm so happy. So we have Anthony Richardson 1, Jim Irsay 0. Will Arthur Blank push to make a move to Michael Penix? That was the conversation. It wasn't like, hey, we need a Kirk Cousins injury in order to go with Michael Penix. It could be that Kirk Cousins loses in completely embarrassing fashion, and 38-6 is pretty embarrassing. It's much better than an injury. This is the way you want it. This is the way things should happen. The meritocracy of the NFL, where guy loses 38-6, and that's how he gets benched. It's embarrassing loss after embarrassing loss. It's getting the bare minimum from what is a talented roster. We drafted a guy in the top 10 who has a total all-purpose skill set at quarterback, and he's seasoned, right? He had 5-6 years in college. He's like close to 30 years old at this point. Michael Penix, right? Isn't he close to 30? So he's ready. He's game ready. Let's go. So let's start the chant. Let's start the big Penix chant. We got to get the big Penix in there. If Kirk Cousins is going to win these games, or he's going to fuel big, hairy spike weeks for the weaponry, then that's fine. Then we'll take Kirk Cousins. But otherwise, get out of here. We'd rather have the guy with mobility. We'd rather have a guy like Bo Nix. Right? Bo Nix only had 5 incompletions, 4 touchdowns. Bo Nix activating Marvin Mims back from the dead. All you Marvin Mims truthers. I can truther for an Elijah Moore, and I have been, and I will continue to. I can't quite get there truthering for Marvin Mims, but I respect the game. I respect anyone that's doing that. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a catch rate above 90%. That's hard to do. So a catch rate above 90%, very difficult. It's much easier to have a 100% catch rate. Okay? So think about it. Think about the math in your head, right? A 100% catch rate is just 2 for 2. So easy. 100% catch rate's simple. Having a catch rate above 90, but not 100, between 90 and 100, is very difficult and much more impressive. That means you necessarily had more than 10 targets. And that's what he did. In a week that DK Metcalf returned, it turns out that the alpha all along is Jackson Smith and Jigba. You love it. You love to see it. He was great in college. He's great in the pros. Why not? right? Now, Jauan Jennings, also in that game, also went 10 for 11. But Jauan Jennings was not nearly as impressive in college. So if you look at his college resume, Jauan Jennings was in college for 5 years, so he was on the Michael Penix plan. Now, he did miss a year with injury, 2017. He did have a 25% target share in his final year at Tennessee. A lot of target competition there. None of them really worked out. Josh Palmer, right? Some solid wide receivers. He was at the Senior Bowl that year. I don't remember him at the Senior Bowl, but he was there. I don't remember, but he was there. I don't remember seeing him or thinking anything about him, but he was there. He is one of the least explosive receivers in the league, and it's now year 4 that he's breaking out. He's a great guy to play in seasonal leagues. We talked about it with Evan. He was like, "You mean Dynasty?" I'm like, No. He was like, "You mean seasonal leagues?" I'm like, No. Wait, how did it go? No, we were having a conversation about Jauan Jennings. And Evan was like, I'm talking about seasonal leagues here. And I was like, oh, no, I was talking about Dynasty. So we had this confusion on the Risers and Fallers show, the 1 month, the monthly show that we do. And, Evan was like, Jauan Jennings is a must start in seasonal leagues. I'm like, that's true. But what about Dynasty? That's fine. Yes, please start him. And, Ricky Pearsall put up a 0. I didn't expect a 0 from Ricky Pearsall. But we talked about benching Ricky Pearsall this week. And that's just because he's not the first, not the second, not the third option. Think about it. You're not starting Jonnu Smith, who's the third option on a similar offense. But you are starting Ricky Pearsall, who's the fourth option, where there are much better options at wide receiver week in, week out. You could just wait and see on Ricky Pearsall. Just like you could wait and see on a bunch of these guys. Wait and see on Adonai Mitchell. Someone was wanting to start Adonai Mitchell. Now, I know Adonai Mitchell was like a yard away from a touchdown. But I was like, you don't need to start Adonai Mitchell, especially if it's Anthony Richardson. Wait and see. Now what we're seeing from Anthony Richardson, it makes Adonai Mitchell a little more interesting. And, wait and see from Ricky Pearsall, you might say, okay, I'll wait another week. And then another week. But the right matchup might align. You might have injuries. You might need upside. That would be the week to start Ricky Pearsall, but Ricky Pearsall, not a guy you can rely on given where he sits in the target pecking order. Jauan Jennings is ahead of him. Turns out Jauan Jennings is like number 1. I don't know how he got there. I think that it's incredibly hard work. He is a ferocious run blocker. He is a sort of a guy that coaches rely on, team leader, first in the building, last out of the building, coach's son type mentality. You love to see it. But longer term, what are the odds that he's Anquan Bolden, that he's Keenan Allen, that a guy that runs a 4.7 is really going to sustain in the NFL? So if you run a 4.7, you didn't necessarily have an impressive college resume, and you're not breaking out until year 4, and then Brandon Ayuk is set to return, a guy that's going to be competing with you on the outside for targets. It's very thin. The case for Jauan Jennings in Dynasty is very thin, and being open to cashing out on Jauan Jennings in Dynasty is something I'm recommending. You could have done it last week, but if you held on and you started him this week, congratulations. Now he just got even more valuable. But I'm not as interested in just punting players in Dynasty that are struggling. Yes, there are sell low opportunities on certain players. We talked about Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman is the ultimate sell low until he ends up on another team, and then all of a sudden, whoops, right? If they somehow find a way to trade him, oh, now he's breaking out again. But he's actually not that impressive of a player when you look at his efficiency. And he's in a terrible situation, no longer the number 1 receiver behind Josh Downs. What is the upside here? You just trade the brand equity away and you take whatever you can get back. That's a great sell low opportunity. But it's better if you can find sell high opportunities. You get more in return, right? I can't believe you'd even put James Cook on the block. Well, you put him on the block because he just scored 2 touchdowns. And he keeps scoring 2 touchdowns. But you know he can't keep it up. And he has huge value. If you want a first-round pick, right? Oh, it's so hard in my league. They never trade first-round picks. Well, you might have to give up something that's really valuable or looks really valuable and take a chance that you're going to feel bad, that you're going to look wrong for a couple weeks. You're going to have that kind of conviction. A guy like Jauan Jennings, he could do it again. A couple weeks from now, he could do it again. Another 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if you traded him, you'd feel sick. But it's that feeling. You have to work through that sickness, that sick feeling in Dynasty when you trade a guy. And then it's all better when the rookie draft happens and you get that first rounder and you just locked in Michael Penix in a superflex league and now you have him in 2025. You're like, oh my God, I'm so happy I have Michael Penix on my roster. Look at this. Cousins just got blown out, right? The doors just got blown off Kirk Cousins. The time is ticking, man, with him under center in Atlanta. It's going to be the Michael Penix show very soon. I'm so happy I did that deal. But for like weeks, I was sick about it. Absolutely sick. So it's a guy like Jauan Jennings, where this is why we have Player Profiler, where you can look at the holistic picture of a guy and go, I think I got to sell this guy in Dynasty. I think it's over. I think this is the time. I think we've reached the peak. It's okay if you don't hit the peak, right? Sometimes it's a false peak, and there's still room to go. He can go even higher. We've still got weeks left in the season. He can keep climbing. There's no Brandon Ayuk. There's now no George Kittle. He can keep climbing and climbing and climbing. But now is a very reasonable time to cash out. You don't need to push it. You don't, because if he gets injured, he'll never produce fantasy points again. Like it's a very precarious situation. Brandon Ayuk goes down with a torn ACL. Okay, he'll be back next year, and he's a stud. Jauan Jennings sustains an injury. Poof. So please put him on the block, please, and just see what happens. Yeah, James Cook, 9 carries, 20 yards, but 2 touchdowns. I mean, come on, man. Come on. 20 yards and 2 touchdowns. Come on, man. Like this is just crazy. What the luck boxing of touchdowns that James Cook and Kyron Williams, what they're doing to me, these are 2 of my biggest Dynasty fades, guys that I'm just trying to, beg people to cash out on. And all they do is just score the most unlikely touchdowns in my face. That is, you have to laugh. When you see 20 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Podfather's face, please, by all means, I give you permission, laugh. It's hilarious. Please laugh in my face. It's great. I'm laughing in my face. I'm also laughing with joy when I see Ladd McConkey. And then I'm crying laughing when I see the 25% catch rate of Quentin Johnston, but of course the touchdown, right? What did I say? Oh, it's time to get out of J.K. Dobbins, right? Sell high on J.K. Dobbins. What does he do? Oh, 2 touchdowns. Right? It's just right. And Tillman gets 8 targets and 7 fantasy points. And it's just like, hey, some weeks it just doesn't quite align, does it, Podfather? And like, no, it doesn't. And that's okay. We're doing okay. And I didn't list all the injuries. So I will take you out. Those are the takeaways. I have no idea whether we hit our takeaway quota. I wasn't counting. I was just trying to do an efficient show, and my father-in-law says that that's his favorite part of the show. He loves this show because of the premise that I'm always trying to get the 10 efficient takeaways, and that the producers really want me to get like a 25-minute show down on wax, and I refuse to do it, and I look up and it's 55 minutes long. And I have no idea how it happened. I don't know how we got I don't know. expect always when I look up, like at this moment in the show, I expect to see the clock saying, and I have a big sort of time clock here. You can see it. You can see this, right? I have this, and I forget to put it up always. I could put it right up here on the camera, and I could always have the timer. And for whatever reason with this show, I hate doing that because I'm like, I can know. I know intuitively. You ever done that where you should have wrote it down? You're like, I'll remember the name of that restaurant. I'll remember. No, I'll remember that person's name. I should have wrote it down. Damn. I thought I'd remember. I told myself to remember and I didn't remember. Like, why don't you listen, brain? I told you to remember that. You didn't remember it. It's the same thing with me. I'm like, I know I can get this thing efficient like the producers want. And then I look up and we're at an hour. And I don't know how the hell that happened. It is the ultimate time warp. You have to understand, I'm falling into a black hole. Oh, like I don't understand how time is going by. It says 55 minutes live. Where did those minutes go? The NFL is so awesome. Like there's this much drama every week that it would be heartbreak after heartbreak, that it would be joy upon joy. It would be careers saved with Anthony Richardson. There would be careers in flames with Kirk Cousins, like this giant phoenix ready to ascend. That's exciting. There's so much there. There's so much there where it's like, oh, great call. Oh, and then it's like all this, hey, you gotta have all this conviction. Guys like Jauan Jennings, they need conviction. You have these guys on the block, or you already traded them, and boom, 2 touchdowns in your face by J.K. Dobbins, 2 touchdowns in your face by James Cook. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. What if you went out and you traded for Brian Thomas at his peak, and now he's a Jaguar, and they're putting up 100 yards, and look at his target share and his air yard share. It's as good as any receiver, but he's not putting up any numbers because he's on the Jaguars, and it's Mac Jones, and it's just the ultimate rotting husk of a franchise. Brian Thomas is the ultimate player that you should be going out and acquiring. He also left with an injury and came back, and he's not playing at 100%. Same thing with Amari Cooper, not 100%, right? I'm excited for Amari Cooper. I have conviction in Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's about to go into a bye week. Same thing with Khalil Shakir. These are guys you need to be buying on the bye week. When they return from the bye week, it's at home against San Francisco, then at the Rams, at the Lions, and then home for New England. 2 of those are fantasy playoff games. The Bills are about to go on a run. Josh Allen's about to go on a run. And I have conviction that Amari Cooper and Josh Allen are a skill match. And I'm not going to just take that first game for Amari Cooper with the Bills and just write him off. No. Will Amari Cooper outscore Jauan Jennings the rest of the season from week 13 onward? Yes, he will. He absolutely will. I have conviction in that. I hope I'm right. I really do. And if I'm wrong, I'll probably be hilarious wrong, hilarious Murphy's Law wrong, and that's always good content. See, I can't lose. This is what I try to tell people. I try to tell my father-in-law. He's like, man, problem is sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes you're big wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And it's great. And I'm like, do you like it better when I'm wrong or when I'm right? He's like, oh, I love it when you're wrong. I'm like, then how do you lose? If anyone is thinking about starting a podcast, of course you're starting a podcast. Well, how could you not start a sports podcast? If you're right, you're right. And when you're wrong, you're right. When you're wrong, it's great. And when you're right, it's great. Who doesn't love that? That's sports. That's the beauty of the NFL. I mean, it really is. That's why this is going to be the show. This is the show I look forward to most I think that's the thing. How is it possible that it's my favorite show and everyone else's favorite show? And then the answer is, how could it be anything other than that? It couldn't be any other way. Because if you have enthusiasm about something, then it's going to be something that infects everybody. And typically, we start the show by listing the injuries that happened. I forgot to do that. I think you might have also noticed that I forgot to do any kind of player profile or promo. I didn't do any of those. So this was in many ways a giant fail, in addition to some of these hilarious performances that ripped my face off and stomped on the ground. My poor face, right? All the skin off the bone on the ground. But I'm committed to at least talking about the injuries that happened. So we'll now close this out. The least exciting, least crescendo-driven end of a show that you could possibly imagine. Let's talk about the injuries. Gabe Davis out with a knee injury. All the more reason to be continuing to play. Brian Thomas, even though this is, oh, God. Oh, Brian Thomas. He also left the game and returned. We'll see what happens. Puka Nacua returned with a rib injury. Foster Moreau returned with a shoulder injury. Dawson Knox returned after he got his eye poked. Khalil Shakir returned, thank God, with a back and hip injury. These Bills, they need a bye week desperately. McConkey hurt his shoulder. That was terrible. He returned, though. You hate seeing McConkey. McConkey's our guy. McConkey, look at his yards per reception. It turns out, not only is he a technician, he's also really explosive. You can't be high enough on McConkey, and that's per Evan Ringler. Evan Ringler was big right, especially in the face of me being wrong this week. Though I wasn't wrong. I'm just, any given week, your projections don't necessarily hit the exact outcome, but I'm not going to take any L's. Just what I might be wrong about a particular week. I'm not taking L's. I just want everyone to know that. At no point in this show am I taking an L. If what I wanted to happen didn't work out, we are going to run out the clock. Okay? There's no L's. Get out of here. T. Higgins returned with a back injury. That's not good. That's not good, though. I loved seeing him perform at a high level. That was cool. What a stack. Burrow, Higgins, and Chase. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Right? For example, Wilson Pickens didn't work out, right? That was another stack that didn't quite fire. Is that a big deal? No. Pickens was great process. He had 8 catches for 89 yards. Just didn't get the touchdown. Elijah Moore got 8 catches, did get the touchdown. Pickens had 12 targets. Russell Wilson had 36 pass attempts. This was good process. It just didn't work out. Pittsburgh's another defense, by the way. They're the Vikings of the AFC, where their defense is a problem. If you're going to shut down the Ravens, even the Ravens can't get more than 16 points, then necessarily you're going to end up running more Najee Harris, 18 carries for Najee Harris, 9 for Warren. Between those two guys, talking about 27 running back carries. Russell Wilson, Fields, Cordarrelle Patterson, they went over 30 total rush attempts. That's the problem when you're at home with a lead. This defense is problematic. So I think Jefferson and Pickens are interesting buys in Dynasty because their defense is what is suppressing them. Now, Jefferson is not really attainable, right? It would be great if you could. I mean, it's so theoretical, no one would ever really give him up, but maybe they would. I don't know. It depends on what you're giving up. But Pickens, that's a guy that actually could be acquired. Right? He only had 16 fantasy points. He had 12 targets, right? So, again, Podfather process, great process week for the Podfather. Results-wise, more injuries. Spears with a concussion. You hate to see it, man. You hate to see it. If he misses, I think we're going back to Pollard. We're getting enough from Levis that you can go back to Pollard next week, especially if Spears is out. Darnell Mooney hamstring injury. God damn it. That one really hurt. Oh, God. So much Mooney. Love Mooney. That hurt. I mean, if that is serious, which we hope it's not, then that could start to, I don't even want to say it. If he misses games in the best ball playoffs, that's just so devastating because we're so overexposed to Mooney in best ball. I hope not. Madison and White both leaving with injury. What does that mean? Huh? What does that mean? Right? That's the you know what I'm trying to get at here? Anyone out there in the chat? Can we please just go ahead? Say it. Say in the chat. I'm not going off the air until someone puts in the chat the name I want to see in the chat. We had an injury to Alexander Madison. We had an injury to Zamir White. What does that mean? What does that mean? Who am I very interested in seeing in the second half for the Raiders? They are in tank mode. This team is going in the wrong direction, but the right direction if they want to maximize their draft picks. And so what offensive player, do they want to get a nice little look at? What player was the best receiver in the 2024 running back draft class? A true all-purpose weapon. Small school guy that we all have stashed on our taxi squad. He's being dropped in Dynasty even and should be scooped immediately. That player's name is... Oh, fuck all of you. Dylan Lobby! From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the host, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.